Okay, so let's get started. First off, you should have gone to Moodle and download the reference images folder called Button Rabbit Reference Images and unzipped it. Once it's unzipped, find where it's located and then copy the entire folder, and you're going to see why in a little bit. So let's just minimize that. For starters, we are going to set up the project correctly by using Maya's built-in asset management system. And we do that by going to File, going to the subheading Project, and we're going to go to Set Project. Now from here, try to find or select your USB drive or your Documents folder, whichever location you wish to place your project. And then you're going to create a new folder, and we're going to name this something along the lines of Box Modeling Rabbit. Something sensible to be able to identify it easily. And once that's done, I'm just going to hit set. It's going to come up with a default window asking if you want to create a default workspace or to set another location. We want to create a default workspace. Now, the second step, we're going to go back into File, go back to Project Subheading, and this time we're going to go to Project Window. Over here, you should see under Current Project the name of the folder that you set as your directory, which is there, and this is what it's going to get populated with, all these lovely folders, in order for Maya to correctly and efficiently organize all of its data and its assets. Just go ahead and click Accept. Now we're going to pop now into our project folder itself. Here we go. So there's mine, Box Modeling Rabbit. And you can see it's already been populated with lots and lots of lovely folders, including a mail file, which is your workspace file. So essentially it's a file that memorizes the setup of what you have in regards of your workspace, what you've docked, etc. What we want to do is go to Source Images. So let's open up Source Images, and we are going to paste the folder that we copied earlier on, which contains our rabbit reference images. There they are. Now with that done, we can close that window safely. And we're going to now set up the viewports inside of Maya. So to do so, I'm going to just tap on the spacebar to come out of perspective, and we now have access to the other three viewports, and we are going to work with the front camera viewport. So we're going to click on this until it's highlighted, and then go to View, Image Plane, Import Image. So using Maya's system, it's jumped straight to the Source Images folder. So we can now very easily just go inside and grab the image that we need. And there we have it. Now if you hit F on your keyboard to fully frame what you have in your view and what's been selected, you can see that it's created a plane, and it's gone ahead and added the image directly onto that plane, and it's generated at the origin, so the 000. What we want to do is slightly move that out because we're going to generate a few more things. So hit W on your keyboard. Let's push this slightly back, just to get a bit of space. And then the next thing we'll do is quickly name our object. So let's give it a sensible name like front ref, so we know what it is. And then we're going to do this one more time. So we're going to come over here, this time to the side viewport. We're going to go to View, Image Plane, and we're going to repeat those steps one more time. This time we're going to get the side image. We're going to open that up. Okay, once again you can see it's been created here. So I'm going to push that back away from the point of origin again. And once again, come over to the outliner, and we're going to name this Sensible and Sensible, like side ref. Okay, so we now have our two reference images set up. We now need an object. Now, before we start using our polygons, what I'd like for you to do is go over to Create, Polygon Primitives, and make sure that Interactive Creation is not ticked. If it is, just please untick it. What we want is for our object to appear on the origin. So I'm going to go ahead and select the cube, and we now have a cube appear in our origin, and this is going to give us a little bit of a helping hand for the next bit. So, oops, zoomed in a bit too much there. So what we now need to do is move these reference images into position. So we're going to take our front image, and using the move tool again, we're going to move it up. Now here's the problem. At the moment, it's free moving, so there's nothing to lock it or put it into increments. So there's a handy little tool that we can use. I'm going to just undo that last maneuver. If you hold down X before you start moving, if you take a close look at the widget center, you'll see it convert into a circle when you hold down X. This is to indicate that it's now in a snap mode. And if you look up there, you can actually see it's also highlighted. So now we have it in snap mode. I'm going to grab the axes pointing up, in this case the y-axis, and I'm going to pull it up until the rabbit's feet are roughly in line with the bottom edge of the cube. And we're going to do the same thing with the side as well. So again, I'm going to hold down X. I'm going to pull this up until it's in rough position with the bottom, which is exactly what we want. Okay, now, last part, we need to secure these reference images so that they A, don't move, and B, are not going to cause us to be confused in perspective viewport, because we're going to be messing with a lot of vertices and edges. We don't really need these to be distracting us. We just want to be able to see them in the camera. And this is how we're going to do that. So the first part, which is to make sure that they don't move, we're going to come into our outliner. I'm going to select the front ref, and then holding control on my keyboard, I'm going to go ahead and select side ref. Now I'm going to come into the channel box layers, and over where there is display on the bottom tab under inputs, you should have these 4 icons. Now go to the far right and click it, and what you've done is you've created a layer, much like there's layers in Photoshop, and now these 2 items are contained within this layer. And the next step we're going to do is we're going to toggle it. So we click once, we'll turn it to a T toggle, which is transparency, and then R will now lock those into place. As you can see, I can't select them, I can't move them, they're completely immobile. So they're protected by that layer now, which is what we want. The other thing we want is not to see them in the perspective. So this is where the next step comes in. So we're going to the display, which is now the only way to select these. I'm going to click the front reference image, and if I go to the attributes editor and under front reference shape, if you come to image plane, you should see a display toggle. Now at the moment it's in all views, and that's the default. What we want is to only be seen looking through the camera. So if we click that, it will vanish, but it's still able to be seen inside the front viewport camera, which is what we want. We're going to do the same thing again with the side. So just go over, click, done. And that's completely disappeared. So now they're protected by the layer, and now they are not being obstructive in the perspective viewport, which is what we want. So we now have everything set. We're going to start actually modeling. So we're going to get a hold of our cube, and the first thing we want to do with our cube is to go into the attribute editor, go over to where it says Lambert 1, and we're going to go to the transparency slider, and we're just going to pull that over slightly until we can see enough of the reference image coming through. This is just to give you a helping hand. Some people don't do this, but I personally do. I think it's very helpful and useful to do. And then the next thing we're going to do is change here we go, Polycube 1, is change the subdivisions. So I'm going to change that subdivision from 1 to 2. And what this will do, if I come over here and frame in, is it will create our first edge going along the width of our cube, which is what we want. Now from this point, we're going to be bouncing back and forth between cameras. Sometimes we'll be working purely with one perspective, and then others will be relying on all 3. So this is the reason why we kind of need this setup. So let's begin with our front viewport. Now what we're going to do is just pull this over slightly, so then it's encompassing the first foot, or in this case our right, his left, and we're going to extrude from the top faces going up. As we extrude each piece, we're going to very carefully locate the best position to create new geometry as we go. Now the rule of thumb is try to think where we bend on the body. So for example, our bend points are the knees, our groin, around the waist, around the top, well, where the top of the ribcage bend point would be, around the neck, and etc. and so on. So I'll show you. So we're going to right click on here and go to face mode. I'm going to go ahead and select these 2 faces. There we go. Holding down shift, you can multiple select. I'm just going to go ahead and do Control E on my keyboard, it will be Command E, I believe, in order to extrude. If you can't get that working, you can also go up to your Mesh Edit Mesh Tools area, and under Mesh Edit, Edit Mesh, you will find Extrude, where you can use from there as well. Now that we have the Poly Extrude working, I'm going to go ahead and just select the gizmo in the front perspective. Now it's important that you extrude by using the front perspective, because it will prevent you from accidentally extruding in other directions. So as I said, for the first line, I'm going to go up to the groin, and then I'm going to just do the shortcut again, repeat the extrude command, and I'm going to pull up to the next one. So that's going to be around the belly button, around the hips kind of area. So let's go just above it. I'm going to extrude again. This time I'm going to pull up to around, well, he's going to have a tiny rib cage, I think. That's my guess. So I'm going to put him there. I'm going to pull up now to the neck. I'm going to, again, extrude. This time I'm pulling up to his nose. Not that the skull bends, but that it's going to that area will make it easier for us to mess with the geometry later on, to mold it and shape it. And I'm going to extrude to cover the eye, and one more to the top of the head. Now we're not going to go all the way up to the ear. You could, but I think at this stage it's just going to make it easier if we take this in parts. So for now we're just going to leave it like this. So once all the extrusions have been done and you're happy with it, you can come out of the extrusion mode. We're going to right click and we're going to go into vertex mode. Now at this stage I'm going to show you something very, very important. From here on we're going to try and work purely from the front camera, but here's a tip. If you're going to select a vertice such as this one here, or actually just pick one where we can see in the actual perspective. Here we go. Okay, so if you were to select this vertice and start to maneuver it, you can see that it's only selected this front vertice. It hasn't selected the back. So please bear in mind to actually marquee select. So in order for you to marquee select, you just click and pull out a marquee around that area, and now you can see that both vertices have been selected. This ensures that alignment is secured, because you want all the vertices to be exactly where they are, both one vertex overlapping the other perfectly. The other thing I'm going to warn you about is when it comes to the seam. Now I'm calling this the seam because we're only modeling half the body. When we're done, we're going to mirror the body over and literally secure it down the middle. Okay, now if you do need to move any of these vertices, the only direction you'll be allowed to move them is up or down, not left or right. And when you do move them, please use the axes widget handles. Try not to move them by hand freely. You will distort the seam and then you'll make more work for yourself later on when it comes to trying to pull them back together. There is a way to repair, but we will address that problem later on. So now that we have our geometry and we have our vertices, let's just go ahead and zoom straight in. So to begin with, let's work on the leg. So the leg, at this point in time, we're missing something here. Personally, I feel in order to get the proper shape, we're going to need one more line coming along here. So let's go into our mesh tools and we're going to grab insert edge loop. And I literally just want one right there. Now that we have our edge loops, and I'm going to come back into vertex mode, I'm going to drag and select, remember the marquee selection, drag and select, and I'm going to start pulling these vertices into place. So I'm just going to yank these up and we're going to follow the outline. So I'm only focusing on the outline at the moment, and the vertices, the very outer vertices, to follow that outline. Now this is where you have to start making judgment calls. Remember when I said it's best to focus on the areas of the body where there's natural bends. This is one of them, and this is the nearest edge to that bend, so we're going to use this to fit around this area here. So I'm going to pull this up slightly, and then I'm going to do the same with this one. And I'm going to pull this in. Okay, now we'll continue just pulling these in, and oops, and I'm going to do a bit of a fast forward here just to give you an idea of what it is that I've done. So bear with me while I switch off to a more advanced file.